Chapter 10 of the Last Journals of David Livingstone in Central Africa from 1865 to his death. Volume 1 of 2, 1866 through 1868, by David Livingstone and Horace Waller. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 10. Grand Reception of the Traveler. Kasembe and his wife. Long stay in the town. Goes to explore Moero. Despatch to Lord Clarendon with notes on recent travels. Illness at the end of 1867. Further exploration of Lake Moero. Flooded plains. The River Luau. Visits Kabawata. Joy of Arabs at Mohammed bin Salah's freedom. Again ill with fever. Stories of underground dwellings. 24th November, 1867. We were called to be presented to Kasembe in a grand reception. The present Kasembe has a very heavy, uninteresting countenance, without beard or whiskers, and somewhat of the Chinese type, and his eyes have an outward squint. He smiled but once during the day, and that was pleasant enough, though the cropped ears and lopped hands, with human skulls at the gate, made me indisposed to look on anything with favor. His principal wife came with her attendants, after he had departed, to look at the Englishman, Moenge Rese. She was a fine, tall, and good-featured lady with 2 spears in her hand. The principal men who had come around made way for her, and called on me to salute. I did so, but she, being 40 yards off, I involuntarily beckoned her to come nearer. This upset the gravity of all her attendants. All burst into a laugh, and ran off. Kasembe's smile was elicited by the dwarf making some uncouth antics before him. His executioner also came forward to look. He had a broad lunda sword on his arm, and a curious scissor-like instrument at his neck for cropping ears. On saying to him that his was nasty work, he smiled, and so did many who were not sure of their ears at the moment. Many men of respectability show that at some former time they have been thus punished. Kasembe sent us another large basket of fire-dried fish. In addition to that, he sent us at Chungu 2 baskets of flour, 1 of dried cassava, and a pot of pombe, or beer. Mohammed, who was accustomed to much more liberal Kasembes, thinks this one very stingy, having neither generosity nor good sense, but as we cannot consume all he gives, we do not complain. 27th November, 1867. Kasembe's chief wife passes frequently to her plantation, carried by 6, or more commonly by 12 men, in a sort of palanquin. She has European features, but light brown complexion. A number of men run before her, brandishing swords and battle-axes, and one beats a hollow instrument, giving warning to passengers to clear the way. She has 2 enormous pipes ready filled for smoking. She is very attentive to her agriculture. Cassava is the chief product. Sweet potatoes, maize, sorghum, panistum, millet, ground oats, cotton. The people seem more savage than any I have yet seen. They strike each other barbarously from mere wantonness, but they are civil enough to me. Mohammed bin Salah proposes to go to Ujiji next month. He waited when he heard of our coming, in order that we might go together. He has a very low opinion of the present chief. The area which has served for building the chief town at different times is about 10 miles in diameter. Mafwe is a shallow piece of water about 2 miles broad, 4 or less long, full of sedgy islands, the abodes of waterfowl, but some are solid enough to be cultivated. The bottom is mud, though sandy at the east shore. It has no communication with the Luapula. 28th November, 1867. The Lunde, Chungu, and Mandapala are said to join and flow into Moero. Fish are in great abundance. Perch. On the west side there is a grove of palm oil palms, and beyond west rises a long range of mountains of the Rua country, 15 or 20 miles off. 1st December, 1867. An old man named Perembe is the owner of the land on which Kasembe has built. They always keep up the traditional ownership. Munongo is a brother of Perembe, and he owns the country east of the Kalongosi. If anyone wished to cultivate land, he would apply to these aboriginal chiefs for it. I asked a man from Kasembe to guide me to south end of Moero, but he advised me not to go as it was so marshy. The Lunde forms a marsh on one side, and the Luapala lets water percolate through sand and mud, and so does the Rabuque, which makes the path often knee-deep. He said he would send men to conduct me to Morero a little further down, and added that we had got very little to eat from him, and he wanted to give more. Morero's south end is about 9 degrees 30 minutes south. Old Perembe is a sensible man. Mohammed thinks him 150 years old. He is always on the side of liberality and fairness. He says that the first Kasembe was attracted to Mafwe by the abundance of fish in it. He has the idea of all men being derived from a single pair. 7th December 1867. It is very cloudy here. No observations can be made, as it clouds over every afternoon and night. 8th and 11th December 1867. Cleared off last night, but intermittent fever prevented my going out. 13th December 1867. Set in rains. A number of fine young girls who live in Kasembe's compound came and shook hands in their way, which is to cross the right over to your left and clasp them, then give a few claps with both hands and repeat the crossed clasp. They want to tell their children that they have seen me. 15th December 1867. Today I announced to Kasembe our intention of going away. 2 traders got the same return present from him that I did, namely, 1 goat and some fish, meal and cassava. I am always ill when not working. I spend my time writing letters to be ready when we come to Ujiji. 18th December 1867. We have been here a month and I cannot get more than 2 lunars. I got altitudes of the meridian of stars north and south soon after we came, but not lunars. Kasembe sent a big basket of fire-dried fish, 2 pots of beer, and a basket of cassava, and says we may go when we choose. 18th December 1867. On going to say goodbye to Kasembe, he tried to be gracious, said that we had eaten but little of his food, yet he allowed us to go. He sent for a man to escort us, and on the 22nd December 1867, we went to Lunde River, crossed it, and went on to sleep at the Chungu, close by the place where Kasembe's court stood when Dr. Lacerda came, for the town was moved further west as soon as the doctor died. There are many palm oil palms about, but no tradition exists of their introduction. 23rd December 1867. We crossed the Chungu, rain from above and cold and wet to the waist below, as I do not lift my shirt, because the white skin makes all stare. I saw black monkeys at this spot. The Chungu is joined by the Kalusi and the Mandapala before it enters Moero. Kasembe said that the Lunde ran into Mafwe. Others denied this and said that it formed a marsh with numbers of pools in long grass, but it may ooze into Mafwe thus. Kasembe sent 3 men to guide me to Morero. 24th December, drizzly rain, and we are in a miserable spot by the Kabusi, in a bed of brackens 4 feet high. The guides won't stir in this weather. I gave beads to buy what could be got for Christmas. 25th December, 1867. Drizzly showers every now and then. Soil, black mud. About 10 men came as guides and as a convoy of honor to Mohammed. 27th December, 1867. In 2 hours we crossed Mandapala, now waist deep. This part was well stocked with people 5 years ago, but Kasembe's severity in cropping ears and other mutilations, selling the children for slight offenses, etc., made them all flee to neighboring tribes, and now, if he sent all over the country, he could not collect 1,000 men. Livingstone refers, on the 15th December, to some writings he was engaged upon, and we find one of them here in his journal, which takes the form of a despatch to Lord Clarendon, with a note attached to the effect that it was not copied or sent, as he had no paper for the purpose. It affords an epitomized description of his late travels and the stay at Kasembe, and is inserted here in the place of many notes written daily, but which only repeat the same events and observations in a less readable form. It is especially valuable at this stage of his journal because it treats on the whole geography of the district between Lakes Nyassa and Morero, with a broad handling which is impossible in the mere jottings of a diary. Town of Kasembe, 10th December, 1867. Latitude 9 degrees, 37 minutes, 13 seconds south. Longitude 28 degrees east. The Right Honourable the Earl of Clarendon. My Lord, the first opportunity I had of sending a letter to the coast occurred in February last, when I was at a village called Molemba, latitude 10 degrees 14 minutes south, longitude 31 degrees 46 minutes east, in the country named Lobemba. Lobisa, Lobemba, Ulungu, and Italunda are the names by which the districts of an elevated region between the parallels 11 degrees and 8 degrees south and meridians 28 degrees through 33 degrees longitude east are known. The altitude of this upland is from 4,000 to 6,000 feet above the level of the sea. It is generally covered with forest, well watered by numerous rivulets, and comparatively cold. The soil is very rich and yields abundantly wherever cultivated. This is the watershed between the Luanga, a tributary of the Zambezi, and several rivers which flow towards the north. Of the latter, the most remarkable is the Chambezi, for it assists in the formation of 3 lakes and changes its name 3 times in the 500 or 600 miles of its course. On leaving Lobemba, we entered Ulungo, and as we proceeded northwards, perceived by the barometers in the courses of numerous rivulets that a decided slope lay in that direction. A friendly Ulungu chief named Kasonso, on hearing that I wished to visit Lake Liemba, which lies in his country, gave his son with a large escort to guide me thither, and on the 2nd April last we reached the brim of the deep cup-like cavity in which the lake reposes. The descent is 2,000 feet, and still the surface of the water is upwards of 2,500 feet above the level of the sea. The sides of the hollow are very steep, and sometimes the rocks run the whole 2,000 feet sheer down to the water. Nowhere is there 3 miles of level land from the foot of the cliffs to the shore, but top, sides, and bottom are covered with well-grown wood and grass, except where the bare rocks protrude. The scenery is extremely beautiful. The Easy, a stream of 15 yards broad and thigh deep, came down alongside our precipitous path and formed cascades by leaping 300 feet at a time. These, with the bright red of the clay schists among the greenwood trees, made the dullest of my attendants pause and remark with wonder. Antelopes, buffaloes, and elephants abound on the steep slopes, and hippopotami, crocodiles, and fish swam in the water. Gnus are here unknown, and these animals may live to old age if not beguiled into pitfalls. The elephants sometimes eat the crops of the natives and flap their big ears just outside the village stockades. One got out of our way onto a comparatively level spot, and then stood and roared at us. Elsewhere they make clear off at a sight of man. The first village we came to on the banks of the lake had a grove of palm oil and other trees around it. This palm tree was not the dwarf species seen on Lake Nyassa. A cluster of the fruit passed the door of my hut, which required 2 men to carry it. The fruits seemed quite as large as those on the west coast. Most of the natives live on 2 islands where they cultivate the soil, rear goats, and catch fish. The lake is not large, from 15 to 20 miles broad and from 30 to 40 long. It is the receptacle of 4 considerable streams and sends out an arm 2 miles broad to the north-northwest. It is said to Tanganyika, and it may be a branch of that lake. One of the streams, the Lanzua, drives a smooth body of water into the lake 50 yards broad and 10 fathoms deep, bearing on its surface duckweed and grassy islands. I could see the mouths of other streams, but got near enough to measure the Lofu only, and at a ford 50 miles from the confluence it was 100 yards wide and waist deep in the dry season. We remained 6 weeks on the shores of the lake, trying to pick up some flesh and strength. A party of Arabs came into Ulungu after us in search of ivory, and hearing that an Englishman had preceded them, naturally inquired where I was. But our friends, the Baulungu, suspecting that mischief was meant, stoutly denied that they had ever seen anything of the sort, and then became very urgent that I should go on to one of the inhabited islands for safety. I regret that I suspected them of intending to make me a prisoner there, which they could have easily done by removing the canoes. But when the villagers who deceived the Arabs told me afterwards with an air of triumph how nicely they had managed, I saw that they had only been anxious for my safety. On 3 occasions the same friendly disposition was shown, and when we went round the west side of the lake in order to examine the arm or branch above referred to, the headman at the confluence of the Lofu protested so strongly against my going, the Arabs had been fighting, and I might be mistaken for an Arab and killed, that I felt half inclined to believe him. 2 Arab slaves entered the village the same afternoon in search of ivory, and confirmed all he had said. We now altered our course, intending to go south about the district disturbed by the Arabs. When we had gone 60 miles, we heard that the headquarters of the Arabs were 22 miles further. They had found ivory very cheap, and pushed on to the west, till attacked by a chief named Nisama, whom they beat in his own stockade. They were now at a loss which way to turn. On reaching Chitimba's village, latitude 8 degrees 57 minutes 55 seconds south, longitude 30 degrees 20 minutes east, I found them about 600 in all, and on presenting a letter I had from the Sultan of Zanzibar, was immediately supplied with provisions, beads, and cloth. They approved of my plan of passing to the south of Nasama's country, but advised waiting till the effects of punishment, which the Balungu had resolved to inflict on Nasama for breach of public law, were known. It had always been understood that whoever brought goods into the country was to be protected, and 2 hours after my arrival at Chitimba's, the son of Kasono, our guide, marched in with his contingent. It was anticipated that Nasama might flee. If to the north, he would leave me free passage through his country. If to the south, I might be safe from walking into his hands. But it turned out that Nasama was anxious for peace. He had sent 2 men with elephants' tusks to begin a negotiation, but treachery was suspected and they were shot down. Another effort was made with 10 goats and repulsed. This was much to the regret of the head Arabs. It was fortunate for me that the Arab goods were not all sold, for Lake Moero lay in Nasama's country, and without peace no ivory could be bought, nor could I reach the lake. The peacemaking between the people and Arabs was, however, a tedious process, occupying 3.5 months, drinking each other's blood. This, as I saw it west of this in 1854, is not more horrible than the 30th dilution of deadly nightshade or strychnine is in homeopathy. I thought that had I been an Arab I could easily swallow that, but not the next means of cementing the peace, marrying a black wife. Nasama's daughter was the bride, and she turned out very pretty. She came riding pick-a-back on a man's shoulders. This is the most dignified conveyance that chiefs and their families can command. She had 10 maids with her, each carrying a basket of provisions, and all having the same beautiful features as herself. She was taken by the principal Arab, but soon showed that she preferred her father to her husband. For seeing preparations made to send off to purchase ivory, she suspected that her father was to be attacked and made her escape. I then visited Nasama, and as he objected to many people coming near him, took only 3 of my 8 attendants. His people were very much afraid of firearms and felt all my clothing to see if I had concealed any on my person. Nasama is an old man with head and face like those sculptured on the Assyrian monuments. He has been a great conqueror in his time, and with bows and arrows was invincible. He is said to have destroyed many native traders from Tanganyika, but 20 Arab guns made him flee from his own stockade and caused a great sensation in the country. He was much taken with my hair and woolen clothing, but his people, heedless of his scolding, so pressed upon us that we could not converse, and after promising to send for me to talk during the night, our interview ended. He promised guides to Moero and sent us more provisions than we could carry, but showed so much distrust that after all we went without his assistance. Nasama's people are particularly handsome. Many of the men have as beautiful heads as one could find in an assembly of Europeans. All have very fine forms, with small hands and feet. None of the West Coast ugliness, from which most of our ideas of the Negroes are derived, is here to be seen. No prothagnious jaws or lark heels offended the sight. My observations deepened the impression first obtained from the remarks of Winward Reade, that the typical Negro is seen in the ancient Egyptian, and not in the ungainly forms, which grow up in the unhealthy swamps of the West Coast. Indeed, it is probable that this upland forest region is the true home of the Negro. The women excited the admiration of the Arabs. They have fine, small, well-formed features. Their great defect is one of fashion, which does not extend to the next tribe. They file their teeth to points, the hussies, and that makes their smile like that of the crocodile. Nasama's country is called Ottawa, and his principal town is in latitude 8 degrees 55 minutes south and longitude 29 degrees 21 minutes east. From the large population he had under him, Ottawa is in many parts well cleared of trees for cultivation, and it is lower than Ilungu, being generally about 3,000 feet above the sea. Long lines of tree-covered hills raised some 600 or 700 feet above these valleys of denudation prevent the scenery from being monotonous. Large game is abundant. Elephants, buffaloes, and zebras grazed in large numbers on the long, sloping banks of a river called Kisera, 1.5 miles broad. In going north we crossed this river, or rather marsh, which is full of papyrus plants and reeds. Our ford was an elephant's path, and the roots of the papyrus, though a carpet to these animals, were sharp and sore to feet usually protected by shoes, and often made us shrink and flounder into holes chest deep. The Crusader forms a larger marsh west of this, and it gives off its water to the Colongosi, a feeder of Lake Moero. The Arabs sent out men in all directions to purchase ivory, but their victory over Nasama had created a panic among the tribes which no verbal assurances could allay. If Nasama had been routed by 20 Arab guns, no one could stand before them but Kasembe, and Kasembe had issued strict orders to his people not to allow the Arabs who fought Nasama to enter his country. They did not attempt to force their way, but after sending friendly messages and presents to different chiefs, when these were not cordially received, turned off in some other direction, and at last, despairing of more ivory, turned homewards. From first to last they were extremely kind to me and showed all due respect to the Sultan's letter. I am glad that I was witness to their mode of trading in ivory and slaves. It formed a complete contrast to the atrocious dealings of the Kilwa traders, who are supposed to be, but are not, the subjects of the same Sultan. If one wished to depict the slave trade in its most attractive, or rather least objectionable form, he would accompany these gentlemen subjects of the Sultan of Zanzibar. If he would describe the land traffic in its most disgusting phases, he would follow the Kilwa traders along the road to Nyassa, or the Portuguese half-castes from Tet to the river Shiré. Keeping to the north of Nasama altogether and moving westwards, our small party reached the north end of Moero on the 8th November last. There the lake is a goodly piece of water, 12 or more miles broad, and flanked on the east and west by ranges of lofty tree-covered mountains. The range on the west is the highest, and is part of the country called Rua Moero. It gives off a river at its northwest, called Lualaba, and receives the river Kalongosi, pronounced by the Arabs Karongwisi, on the end near its middle, and the rivers Luapula and Ravukwe at its southern extremity. The points of most interest in Lake Moero is that it forms one of a chain of lakes connected by a river some 500 miles in length. First of all, the Chambezi rises in the country of Mambwe, northeast of Molemba. It then flows southwest and west till it reaches latitude 11 degrees south and longitude 29 degrees east, where it forms Lake Bemba, or Banguiolo. Emerging thence, it assumes the new name Luapola, and comes down here to fall into Moero. On going out of this lake, it is known by the name Lualaba, as it flows northwest into Rua to form another lake with many islands called Urenge or Ulenge. Beyond this, information is not positive as to whether it enters Tanganyika or another lake beyond that. When I crossed the Chambezi, the similarity of names led me to imagine that this was a branch of the Zambezi. The natives said no, this goes southwest and forms a very large water there. But I had become prepossessed with the idea that Lake Liemba was that Bemba of which I had heard in 1863, and we have been so starved in the south that I gladly set my face north. The river-like prolongation of Liemba might go to Moero, and where I could not follow the arm of Liemba. Then I worked my way to this lake. Since coming to Kasembes, the testimony of natives and Arabs has been so united and consistent that I am but 10 days from Lake Bemba, or Banguiolo, that I cannot doubt its accuracy. I am so tired of exploration without a word from home or anywhere else for 2 years that I must go to Ujiji on Tanganyika for letters before doing anything else. The banks and country adjacent to Lake Banguiolo are reported to be now very muddy and very unhealthy. I have no medicine. The inhabitants suffer greatly from swelled thyroid gland or Derbyshire neck and elephantiasis, and this is the rainy season and very unsafe for me. When at the lower end of Moero, we were so near to Kasembe that it was thought well to ascertain the length of the lake and see Kasembe too. We came up between the double range that flanks the east of the lake, but mountains and plains are so covered with well-grown forest that we could seldom see it. We reached Kasembe's town on the 28th November. It stands near the north end of the lakelet Mafwe. This is from 1 to 3 miles broad and some 6 or 7 long. It is full of sedgy islands and abounds in fish. The country is quite level, but 15 or 20 miles west of Mafwe we see a long range of the mountains of Rua. Between this range and Mafwe, the Luapula flows past into Moero. The lake called Moero Okata equals the Great Moero, being about 50 miles long. The town of Kasembe covers a mile square of cassava plantations, the huts being dotted over that space. Some have square enclosures of reeds, but no attempt has been made at arrangement. It might be called a rural village rather than a town. No estimate could be formed by counting the huts, they were so irregularly planted and hidden by cassava, but my impression from other collections of huts was that the population was under 1,000 souls. The court or compound of Cazembe, some would call it a palace, is a square enclosure of 300 yards by 200 yards. It is surrounded by a hedge of high reeds. Inside, where Cazembe honored me with a grand reception, stands a gigantic hut for Cazembe and a score of small huts for domestics. The queen's hut stands behind that of the chief, with a number of small huts also. Most of the enclosed space is covered with a plantation of cassava, Quercus purgaris, and cotton. Cazembe sat before his hut on an equate seat placed on lion and leopard skins. He was clothed in a coarse blue and white Manchester print edged with red baize, and arranged in large folds so as to look like a crinoline put on wrong side foremost. His arms, legs, and head were covered with sleeves, leggings, and cap made of various colored beads and neat patterns. A crown of yellow feathers surmounted his cap. Each of his headmen came forward, shaded by a huge ill-made umbrella, and followed by his dependents, made obeisance to Cazembe, and sat down on his right and left. Various bands of musicians did the same. When called upon, I rose and bowed, and an old counselor, with his ears cropped, gave the chief as a full account as he had been able to gather during our stay of the English in general, and my antecedents in particular. My having passed through Lunda to the west of Cazembe and visited chiefs of whom he scarcely knew anything, excited most attention. He then assured me that I was welcome to his country, to go where I liked, and do what I chose. We then went, 2 boys carrying his train behind him, to an inner apartment where the articles of my present were exhibited in detail. He had examined them privately before, and we knew that he was satisfied. They consisted of 8 yards of orange-colored serge, a large striped tablecloth, another large cloth made at Manchester in imitation of West Coast native manufacture, which never fails to excite the admiration of Arabs and natives, and a large, richly gilded comb for the back hair, such as ladies wore 50 years ago. This was given to me by a friend at Liverpool, and as Cazembe and Nasama's people cultivate the hair into large knobs behind, I was sure that this article would tickle the fancy. Cazembe expressed himself pleased and again bade me welcome. I had another interview and tried to dissuade him from selling his people as slaves. He listened a while, then broke off into a tirade on the greatness of his country, his power and dominion, which Mohammed bin Salah, who has been here for 10 years, turned into ridicule, and made the audience laugh by telling how other Lunda chiefs had given me oxen and sheep, while Cazembe had only a poor little goat and some fish to bestow. He insisted also that there were but 2 sovereigns in the world, the Sultan of Zanzibar and Victoria. When we went on a third occasion to bid Cazembe farewell, he was much less distant and gave me the impression that I could soon become friends with him, but he has an ungainly look and an outward squint in each eye. A number of human skulls adorn the entrance to his courtyard, and great numbers of his principal men have their ears cropped, and some with their hands lopped off, showed his barbarous way of making his ministers attentive and honest. I could not avoid indulging a prejudice against him. The Portuguese visited Cazembe long ago, but as each new Cazembe builds a new town, it is not easy to fix on the exact spot to which strangers came. The last 7 Cazembes have had their towns within 7 miles of the present one. Dr. Lacerda, governor of Tete on the Zambezi, was the only visitor of scientific attainments, and he died at the rivulet called Chungu, 3 or 4 miles from this. The spot is called Nchinda, or Inchinda, which the Portuguese wrote Lucenda or Usenda. The latitude given is nearly 50 miles wrong, but the natives say that he lived only 10 days after his arrival, and if, as is probable, his mind was clouded with fever when he last observed, those who have experienced what that is will readily excuse any mistake he may have made. His object was to accomplish a much desired project of the Portuguese, to have an overland communication between their eastern and western possessions. This was never made by any of the Portuguese nation, but 2 black traders succeeded partially with a part of the distance, crossing once from Kasange in Angola to Tete on the Zambezi, and returning with a letter from the governor of Mozambique. It is remarkable that this journey, which was less by 1,000 miles than from sea to sea and back again, should have forever quenched all white Portuguese aspirations for an overland route. The different Casembes visited by the Portuguese seem to have varied much in character and otherwise. Pereira, the first visitor, said, I quote from memory, that Casembe had 20,000 trained soldiers, watered his streets daily, and sacrificed 20 human victims every day. I could hear nothing of human sacrifices now, and it is questionable if the present Casembe could bring 1,000 stragglers into the field. When he usurped power 5 years ago, his country was densely peopled, but he was so severe in his punishments, cropping the ears, lopping off the hands, and other mutilations, selling the children for very slight offenses, that his subjects gradually dispersed themselves in the neighboring countries beyond his power. This is the common mode by which tyranny is cured in parts like these, where fugitives are never returned. The present Casembe is very poor. When he had people who killed elephants, he was too stingy to share the profits of the sale of the ivory with his subordinates. The elephant hunters have either left him or neglect hunting, so he has now no tusks to sell the Arab traders who come from Tanganyika. Major Monteiro, the third Portuguese who visited Casembe, appears to have been badly treated by this man's predecessor, and no other of his nation has ventured so far since. They do not lose much by remaining away, for a little ivory and slaves are all that Casembe ever can have to sell. About a month to the west of this, the people of Katanga smelt copper ore, malachite, into large bars shaped like a capital letter I. They may be met with of from 50 to 100 pounds weight all over the country, and the inhabitants draw the copper into wire for armlets and leglets. Gold is also found at Katanga, and specimens were lately sent to the Sultan of Zanzibar. As we come down from the watershed towards Tanganyika, we enter an area of the earth's surface still disturbed by internal igneous action. A hot fountain in the country of Nasama is often used to boil cassava and maize. Earthquakes are by no means rare. We experienced the shock of one while at Chitimba's village, and they extend as far as Casembe's. I felt as if afloat, and as huts would not fall, there was no sense of danger. Some of them that happened at night set the fowls a-cackling. The most remarkable effect of this one was that it changed the rates of the chronometers. No rain fell after it. No one had access to the chronometers but myself, and as I had never heard of this effect before, I may mention that one which lost with great regularity 1½ seconds daily lost 15 seconds. Another whose rate since leaving the coast was 15 seconds lost 40 seconds, and a third which gained 6 seconds daily stopped altogether. Some of Nasama's people ascribed the earthquakes to the hot fountain because it showed unusual commotion on these occasions. Another hot fountain exists near Tanganyika than Nasama's, and we passed one on the shores of Moero. We could not understand why the natives called Moero much larger than Tanganyika till we saw both. The greater lake lies in a comparatively narrow trough with highlands on each side, which is always visible. But when we look at Moero, to the south of the mountains of Rua on the west, we have nothing but an apparently boundless sea horizon. The Luapula and Rovukwe form a marsh at the southern extremity, and Casembe dissuaded me from entering it, but sent a man to guide me to different points of Moero further down. From the heights at which the southern portions were seen, it must be from 40 to 60 miles broad. From the south end of the mountains of Rua, 9 degrees 4 minutes south latitude, it is 33 miles broad. No native ever attempts to cross it even there. Its fisheries are of great value to the inhabitants, and the produce is carried to great distances. Among the vegetable products of this region, that which interested me most was a sort of potato. It does not belong to the solanaceous, but to the papilionaceous, or pea family, and its flowers have a delightful fragrance. It is easily propagated by small cuttings of the root or stalk. The tuber is oblong, like our kidney potato, and when boiled, tastes exactly like our common potato. When unripe, it has a slight degree of bitterness, and it is believed to be wholesome. A piece of the root eaten raw is a good remedy in nausea. It is met with on the uplands alone, and seems incapable of bearing much heat, though I kept some of the roots without earth in a box, which was carried in the sun almost daily for 6 months, without destroying their vegetative power. It is remarkable that in all the central region of Africa visited, the cotton is that known as the Pernambuco variety. It has a long, strong staple, seeds clustered together and adherent to each other. The bushes, 8 or 10 feet high, have woody stems, and the people make strong, striped black and white shawls of the cotton. It was pleasant to meet the palm oil palm, Elias guineaensis, at Casembe's, which is over 3,000 feet above the level of the sea. The oil is sold cheap, but no tradition exists of its introduction into the country. I send no sketch of the country because I have not yet passed over a sufficient surface to give it a connected view of the whole watershed of this region, and I regret that I cannot recommend any of the published maps I have seen as giving even a tolerable idea of the country. One bold constructor of maps has tacked on 200 miles to the northwest end of Lake Nyasa, a feat which no traveler has ever ventured to imitate. Another has placed a river in the same quarter running 3,000 or 4,000 feet uphill and named it the New Zambezi, because I suppose the old Zambezi runs downhill. I have walked over both these mental abortions and did not know that I was walking on water till I saw them in the maps. The dispatch breaks off at this point. The year concludes with health impaired. As time goes on, we shall see how ominous the conviction was which made him dread the swamps of Bangweolo. 28th through 31st December 1867. We came on to the rivulet Chirongo and then to Kabukwa, where I was taken ill. Heavy rains kept the convoy back. I have had nothing but coarsely ground sorghum meal for some time back and am weak. I used to be the first in the line of march, and now am the last. Mohammed presented a meal of finely ground porridge and a fowl, and I immediately felt the difference, though I was not grumbling at my coarse dishes. It is well that I did not go to Bangweolo Lake, for it is now very unhealthy to the natives, and I fear that without medicine, continual wettings by fording rivulets might have knocked me up altogether. As I have mentioned, people suffer greatly from swelled thyroid gland, or Derbyshire neck, and elephantiasis scroti. 1st January, 1868. Almighty Father, forgive the sins of the past year for thy Son's sake. Help me to be more profitable during this year. If I am to die this year, prepare me for it. I bought 5 hose at 2 or 3 yards of calico each. They are 13 1/2 inches by 6 1/2 inches. Many are made in Kasembe's country, and this is the last place we can find them. When we come into Bure, we can purchase a good goat for one. One of my goats died and the other dried up. I long for others, as milk is the most strengthening food I can get. My guide to Moero came today, and I visited the lake several times so as to get a good idea of its size. The first 15 miles in the north are from 12 or more to 33 miles broad. The great mass of the Rua Mountains confines it. Thus, on a clear day, a lower range is seen continued from the high point of the first mass away to the west-southwest. This ends, and sea horizon is alone visible away to the south and west. From the height we viewed it at, the width must be over 40, perhaps 60 miles. A large island called Kirwa is situated between the Mandapala and Kabukwa rivers, but nearest to the other shore. The natives never attempt to cross any part of the lake south of this Kirwa. Land could not be seen with a good glass on the clearest day we had. I can understand why the natives pronounced Moero to be larger than Tanganyika. In the last named, they see the land always on both sides. It is like a vast trough, flanked with highlands, but at Moero nothing but sea horizon can be seen when one looks southwest of the Rua Mountains. At the Kalungosi meadow, one of Mohammed's men shot a buffalo, and he gave me a leg of the good beefy flesh. Our course was slow, caused partly by rains and partly by waiting for the convoy. The people at Congolosi were afraid to ferry us or any of his people in the convoy out of Kasembe's country, but at last we gave a good fee, and their scruples yielded. They were influenced also by seeing other villagers ready to undertake the job. The latter nearly fought over us on seeing that their neighbors got all the fare. We then came along the lake and close to its shores. The moisture caused a profusion of gingers, ferns, and tropical forest. Buffaloes, zebras, and elephants are numerous, and the villagers at Chikosi's, where we slept, warned us against lions and leopards. 12th January, 1868. Sunday at Karembe's village. The mountains east of him are called Makunga. We went yesterday to the shore, and by protraction Rua Point was distant 33 miles. He is a large man, with a gruff voice, but liked by his people and by strangers. I gave him a cloth, and he gave me a goat. The enthusiasm with which I held on to visit Moero had communicated itself to Tipo Tipo and Said bin Ali, for they followed me up to this place to see the lake, and remained 5 days while we were at Kasembe's. Other Arabs, or rather Swahilis, must have seen it, but never mentioned it as anything worth looking at. And it was only when all hope of ivory was gone that these two headmen found time to come. There is a large population here. 13th January 1868. Heavy rains. Karembe mentioned a natural curiosity as likely to interest me. A little rivulet, Chimpamba, goes some distance underground, but is uninteresting. Next day we crossed the Vuna, a strong torrent, which has a hot fountain close by the ford, in which maize and cassava may be boiled. A large one in Nasama's country is used in the same way, maize and cassava being tied to a string and thrown in to be cooked. Some natives believe that earthquakes are connected with its violent ebullitions. We crossed the Katete, another strong torrent, before reaching the north end of Moero, where we slept in some travelers' huts. Leaving the lake and going north, we soon got on to a plain flooded by the luau. We had to wade through very adhesive black mud, generally ankle deep, and having many holes in it much deeper. We had 4 hours of this, and then came to the ford of the luau itself. We waded up a branch of it waist deep for at least a quarter of a mile, then crossed a narrow part by means of a rude bridge of branches and trees, of about 40 yards width. The luau, in spreading over the plains, confers benefits on the inhabitants, though I could not help concluding it imparts disease too, for the black mud in places smells horribly. Great numbers of Siluridae, chiefly Clarius capensis, often 3 feet in length, spread over the flooded portions of the country, eating the young of other fishes and insects, lizards, and worms killed by waters. The people make their weirs for them, and as the waters retire kill large numbers, which they use as a relish to their farinaceous food. 16th January 1868. After sleeping near the luau, we went on towards the village in which Muhammad's son lives. It is on the Kokoma River and is called Kabwabwata, the village of Mubau. In many of the villages, the people shut their stockades as soon as we appear, and stand bows and arrows in hand till we have passed. The reason seems to be that the slaves, when out of sight of their masters, carry things with a high hand, demanding food and other things as if they had power and authority. One slave stole 2 tobacco pipes yesterday in passing through a village. The villagers complained to me when I came up, and I waited till Mohammed came and told him. We then went forward, the men keeping close to me, till we got the slave and the pipes. They stole cassava as we went along, but this could scarcely be prevented. They laid hold of a plant 1.5 inches thick and tore it out of the soft soil with its 5 or 6 roots as large as our largest carrots, stowed the roots away in their loads, and went on eating them. But the stalk thrown among those still growing shows the theft. The raw roots are agreeable and nutritious. No great harm is done by this, for the gardens are so large, but it inspires distrust in the inhabitants and makes it dangerous for Arabs to travel not fully manned and armed. On reaching the village Kabwabwata, a great demonstration was made by Muhammad's Arab dependents and Wayamwisi. The women had their faces all smeared with pipe clay and lulilooed with all their might. When we came among the huts, they cast hands full of soil on their heads, while the men fired off their guns as fast as they could load them. Those connected with Muhammad ran and kissed his hands and fired till the sound of shouting, lulalooing, clapping of hands, and shooting was deafening. Muhammad was quite overcome by this demonstration, and it was long before he could still them. On the way to this village from the south, we observed an extensive breadth of land under ground nuts, which are made into an oil. A large jar of this is sold for a hoe. The ground nuts were now in flower, and green maize ready to be eaten. People all busy planting, transplanting, or weeding. They plant cassava on mounds prepared for it, on which they have sown beans, sorghum, maize, pumpkins. These ripen and leave the cassava a free soil. The sorghum or dora is sown thickly, and when about 1 foot high, if the owner has been able to prepare the soil elsewhere, it is transplanted, a portion of the leaves being cut off to prevent too great evaporation and the death of the plant. 17th January, 1868. The Wayamwisi and people of Garaganza say that we have 13 days' march from this to the Tanganyika Lake. It is often muddy, and many rivulets are to be crossed. Muhammad is naturally anxious to stay a little while with his son, for it is a wet season, and the mud is disagreeable to travel over. It is said to be worse near Ujiji. He cooks small delicacies for me with the little he has, and tries to make me comfortable. Vinegar is made from bananas and oil from ground nuts. I am anxious to be off, but chiefly to get news. I find that many Unamwisi people are waiting here on account of the great quantity of rainwater in front. It would be difficult, they say, to get canoes on Tanganyika as the waves are now large. 24th January 1868. 2 of Muhammad Baghrib's people came from Kasembes to trade here, and a body of Said bin Habib's people, also from Garaganza, near Kazay. They report the flooded lands on this side of Lake Tanganyika as waist and chest deep. Bin Habib, being at Katanga, will not stir till the rains are over, and I fear we are storm-stayed till then too. The feeders of the Marungu are not fordable just now, and no canoes are to be had. 26th and 27th January 1868. I am ill with fever, as I always am when stationary. 28th January 1868. Better, and thankful to him of the greatest name. We must remain. It is a dry spot, and favorable for ground nuts. Whooping cough here. 30th January 1868. The earth cooled by the rain last night sends all to transplanting durra or sorghum. They cut the leaves till only about 18 inches of them are left, but it grows all the better for the change of place. Muhammad believes that Tanganyika flows through Rusizi to Lohindi, Chuambo. Syed is said to have been the first Arab sultan who traded, and Syed Majid follows the example of his father, and has many Arab traders in his employment. He lately sent 8 buffaloes to Matiza, king of Uganda, son of Suna, by way of increasing his trade, but it is not likely that he will give up the lucrative trade in ivory and slaves. Susie bought a hoe with a little gunpowder, then a cylinder of durra 3 feet long by 2 feet in diameter for the hoe. It is at least 100 weight. Stone underground houses are reported in Rua, but whether natural or artificial, Muhammad could not say. If a present is made to the Rua chiefs, they never obstruct passengers. Chikosi, at whose village we passed a night near Kolongosi, and Chiputa are both dead. The Mafwe fills during the greater rains and spreads over a large district. Elephants then wander in its marshes and are killed easily by people in canoes. This happens every year, and Muhammad Baghrib waits now for this ivory. 7th to 21st February 1868. On inquiring of men who have seen the underground houses in Rua, I find that they are very extensive, ranging along mountainsides for 20 miles, and in one part a rivulet flows inside. In some cases the doorways are level with the country adjacent, in others ladders are used to climb up to them. Inside they are said to be very large, and not the work of men but of God. The people have plenty of fowls, and they too obtain shelter in these troglodyte habitations. 23rd February 1868. I was visited by an important chief called Chape, who said that he wanted to make friends with the English. He, Chisapi, Sama, Muabo, Karembwe are of one tribe or family, the Oanza. He did not beg anything, and promised to send me a goat. End of chapter 10.